May we, the Council of the Town of Bassendean, being mindful of the Code of Conduct, have the integrity and wisdom to consider the matters before us honestly, graciously, and for the greater good of the town. Thank you, everyone. So welcome everyone to the final council meeting for 2018. As always, it's important for us to acknowledge that the land on which we meet is Whadjuk Noongar land, and the ongoing contribution that the Whadjuk people make to our community here, our history and also our future. I'd like to also acknowledge tonight David Lagan, who's here as Deputy Mayor of Stirling, so welcome. Thank you for joining us. Item 2 on the agenda tonight is public question time. I note in the agenda we have some questions that were taken on notice from Mr Aaron McKay and David White, who have had some answers provided. I understand Mr White has just had a brief conversation with the CEO and there might be some further follow-up required there. 2.2 is public question time, so this is the opportunity for anybody who is here present tonight to ask questions of myself and the staff. So if anybody has a question that they would like to ask, I'd ask you to raise your hand and I'll invite you to the microphone. I would like to bring all of your attention though to the fact that our council meetings are recorded, so we're doing this in the interests of transparency and openness with our community, but it does mean that anything that you say in this forum will be broadcast publicly via the internet. So is there anybody who would like to ask a question this evening? Mr Bridges.
Thank you, Is that on?
Yes.
Paul Bridges, 150 West Road, Bassendean. My question is, by what resolution of council the decision was made to fence the reserve adjacent to the RSL Hall in Kenny Street? That's the question, but I had a look at the corporate business plan, and it states the objective is to enhance and develop open spaces and natural areas to facilitate community use and connection. Now, the small reserve next to the RSL now has a steel fence around it with pointed steel spikes on it, and there's a sign on the gate that says no parking, RSL members only. It's a 371 square metre reserve owned by council, zone parks and recreation, so it is public open space. Now, the written answer I've got to that question is, in 2004, the Return Services League of Australia, and it is adjacent to the RSL Hall, WA branch, entered into a 5-year peppercorn agreement for the particular lot. So that means that it would have expired in 2009. Now, and it states here, it was a requirement of the expired lease agreement that the RSL supply and install the installation of the fence. And then it says, it would take me some time to undertake the research to find the council resolution. Now, I was a councillor on the last council for 4 years, and I can guarantee you that absolutely nothing was raised with council about fencing off that reserve. And I've come to most council meetings and read your agendas, and I've seen nothing to do with that. So I'm wondering how we get to a situation where an association has exclusive use for a reserve, and there's a steel fence with steel spikes on it that are sharp. If you tried to climb that fence and slipped, you would be impaled.
So, Mr Stewart-Elkins, I believe you provided that initial response to Mr Bridges. We're seeking some further information.
Yes. The lot in question was originally a residential lot, and then I can't remember the exact year. Mr Reid might be able to confirm, but it was changed over from a residential lot to a lot for parks and recreation, or parks and culture, or something to that effect. And so the fence, the RSL had initially approached the town to say that they'd like this space to be, if they could have this space. I think there was a council resolution, but I don't know the exact resolution, that entered into an agreement. And that agreement has now expired. And there's been recent correspondence with the RSL in regards to the use of their own land, what they want to do with that building. And they've indicated that they don't have an interest in that particular land. So it was going to be subject to a further report back to council to seek council's direction as to how they wish to use that particular reserve in the future.
So sometime in the new year, would be
Yes, that's
expecting to
correct.
have that come before council?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
So why did we get to a situation where it was fenced off with a steel fence? And I'm presuming that the RSL paid for that.
Yes, the RSL did pay for that. So
Can I clarify, when it was fenced off, this was prior to it being zoned as Parks and Recreation? It was
Yes.
when they were leasing it for the purposes of a car park?
yes,
Not
that's
according
right.
to the answer.
Overspill parking. That's correct.
And when, when was the fence constructed? Can you remember approximate timeframes?
Would have been back in when the lease was first established.
And when did the lease expire?
Well,
approximately?
it was a 5-year lease from 2004. So Mr. Bridges is correct. At some time around about 2009, 10, something like that, it would have expired.
But
Thank you.
that fence hasn't been there for 9 years.
Thanks, Mr. Bridges. I guess the opportunity is going to come to consider the future of that land
Thank you.
in the near future. Thank you. Further questions? Yes, Mrs. Dwyer. Mrs. Dwyer? Yes.
Bell Drive, 31 Norton Crescent. I may get a hearing aid next year and I'll be able to hear a bit better. I'm very disappointed in the council. The items I brought up about Guildford Road, nothing has been done. Now, you really look after Old Perth Road, but I say to you, there's more than Old Perth Road to look after. I have been known to bring a brick along here that was on the bridge, and I've still got it. Do you remember that, Simon?
Yes, I
The
do.
brick that I bought? I had been tempted to go and weed by the lights down here, but I wouldn't want to embarrass you to have an 83-year-old with her bottom up in the air pulling up the weeds. But I do think we need to pull our socks up for around all of Bassendean, not just some of Bassendean.
So, Mr. Stuart Dawkins, sorry, you're getting all the attention this evening. So those median strips along Guildford Road, I understand the road itself is managed by Main Roads, but they're our responsibility to maintain the median strips and the islands,
Yes,
the garden beds?
Yes, that's correct. The Guildford Road median strip is scheduled to be for some maintenance to occur in the next 3 weeks. So that's been included into our work schedule, and it's a regular thing that occurs. But Mrs. Dryer's point in regards to the dead Xanthorrhoea plants, which are in the median strip, they've been noted by the park supervisor and will be removed accordingly.
Were you able to hear that, Mrs. Dwyer, the response? Were you able to hear the response? So the work is scheduled to be undertaken sometime in the next 3 weeks?
I'm talking about from the Lord Street Bridge up here to Old Perth Road.
Yeah.
You've got your gardens down here and the monument. You need to complement the whole lot, not just little bits of Bassendean.
No, it's a good point, and we do aim to make sure that we enhance all of those areas. But at the February meeting, Mr. Stuart Dawkins has assured us that the work will be done sometime in the next 3 weeks. So if you're back here in February still saying it hasn't been done, come and hold us to account, please. Thank you. Further questions? Mrs. Jacobson?
Nonnie Jacobson, Spartan Parade, Bassendean. I've got a question regarding item 10.7, which is about an early learning centre, which, from what I gather here, is leased by
That's
the town of
correct.
Bassendean. And it's regarding the potential removal of 2 trees. I'm just querying whether or not the amenity value given to those trees has been factored into the potential costs of the options that have been proposed.
Mr. Stuart Dawkins or Mr. Haggett?
Yes, they have indeed.
So the cost of removal of those trees, the $20,000 of the value that those trees themselves actually have, has been factored into that?
That's correct.
So earlier today there were some email questions from councillors in relation to that issue about the cost of removal, so not just the actual physical removal but the replacement and the cost of the trees, the amenity value.
The value, yeah, because they are a town asset.
Yeah. Thank you for raising that. Yes, Ms. Bremer.
Jane Bremer from 47 7th Avenue, Bassendean.
The agenda item I'm referring to is one of the questions on notice in relation to the Success Hill Reserve and the STEAM management report that item mentions. I have a question to the council about that in relation to that report, but I wanted to take the opportunity to say that we at the Friends of Success Hill Reserve strongly refute that report and the claims that are made. I've now had the opportunity to have a quick look at that report, and it's anything but a report, and it certainly doesn't prove that the STEAM weed trial didn't work at all. And it's quite incredible that a contractor would discredit their own work, and that the trial really only looked at this piece of land for 1 year, didn't include any of the work or contribution of the community groups involved, including Friends of Success Hill Reserve and the Success Hill Action Group, who I see have shown a renewed interest in assisting in the care of this reserve, which we are most excited about. So the work that has been ongoing there by the community wasn't involved in that report, and I think that's a fatal flaw of the report that the council needs to be aware of.
So can I just clarify, so are you asking for